Everybody. Hi, everybody. My name is Melissa Higbee. I'm with the Office of Resilience and Capital Planning. So happy to be with you here tonight. It was great hearing about your weeks. Sounds like you all are into some really exciting work and fun with family and friends. So that's great. I have been with the city. I told Cliff 3 years, and then I realized it was actually 4 years. Time flies. And I'm going to give an overview of the office that I work in, resilience and capital planning, and the work that we do. And, it's kind of a broad overview and a lot of ground to cover. And I just want to leave time to kind of dive into what you all are interested in, any questions, or, comments, or, what you think resilience means in the Richmond district and to you all, and how the city can support that. So this slide has our mission. It's to promote the preservation and long-term sustainability of the city's capital assets and the city's resilience as a whole, no matter the shocks and stresses that we experience. So we lead strategic planning, and we work with other departments in San Francisco to help make the community more resilient. So we're responsible for 4 items here that I'm going to cover during the presentation. Our Hazards and Climate Resilience Plan, the Earthquake Safety Implementation Program, Climate SF, and the 10-year capital plan. So that's what I'll cover today. So Resilient SF, this is providing a little bit of history for how we kind of how this office came to be, how we started thinking about resilience in city government. In 2006, we got a grant from the Rockefeller Foundation to create this strategy to help us define resilience and San Francisco's resilience challenges, and develop a series of initiatives summarized in this strategy document. So these are the kind of the key challenges that we identified back in 2016. A lot of them obviously still resonating. Earthquakes, climate change, and sea level rise, our aging infrastructure, social inequity, and unaffordability. And I think that for resilience, it really helped us think about things from a perspective of breaking down silos, and trying to work on these things from a cross-cutting perspective. That was kind of a new perspective that this strategy brought to our office. In 2020, we published the Hazards and Climate Resilience Plan. So this folds in a lot of the initiatives from the 2016 document. But by 2019 and 2020, a lot of those had actually been accomplished. It was time to think about, well, what's next? So some of the key things about this plan and why it matters is that it's really a roadmap for the city for building resilience and reducing risk to natural hazards. It has more than 95 strategies. We're really trying to make hazard information more accessible. We have online story maps with all of the hazard mapping. We had a focus on equity and health in this document, and we made it with a lot of department and stakeholder engagement. It also meets federal and state requirements. We have to update this plan every 5 years to get FEMA hazard mitigation funding. So it's really important to have this document in place and keep it up to date for that important source of funding, and also some state requirements around climate adaptation planning as well. So these are the 13 natural hazards that this document has an assessment of the vulnerabilities and the risks that we face as a result of these natural hazards. We also looked at how climate change influences almost all of these hazards. We used to have in an older plan climate change as kind of a separate hazard, but we realized, it's really affecting everything from flooding, poor air quality, the chance of a hazardous material spill, even something like earthquakes. Okay, you don't think earthquakes have to do with climate change, but actually sea level rise could cause liquefaction to get worse. So climate change is really infused throughout this document and the analysis of the hazards and how they're changing going forward. This provides a bit of an overview of what we have in our 95 plus strategies. We broke it out by communities, buildings, infrastructure, and then some cross-cutting strategies that really didn't fall into those three categories. So this just gives you a sense that it is, really comprehensive. Covers things like housing and businesses and how they recover in the workforce, to transportation and research and planning. So this just gives you a sense of what a strategy looks like in this plan. We discussed what the vulnerability is that we're addressing, a summary of it. We identify who's the lead department for carrying this out, what we think the cost is. And we're following up on these strategies every year to see what progress we're making on implementing them. So that's kind of an overview of it, and just want to point you to additional resources online for this plan if you want to explore it more. There is a strategy dashboard, so you can explore those 95 plus strategies a bit more. You could kind of filter for who the lead department is or what hazard, or if you want to look at, whether it's a brand new strategy or something that's been ongoing. Those are the types of filters you can kind of slice and dice to learn more. We also have the story map that I told you about if you want to explore kind of the hazards in your neighborhood or other places that you might care about across the city. And we also have a summary report that has it's a little bit more kind of graphically oriented compared to the big report we had to write for FEMA. So that's the Hazards and Climate Resilience Plan. Another program that our office administers and is incorporated into the Hazards and Climate Resilience Plan is our Earthquake Safety Implementation Program. So this was developed after we created the Community Action Plan for Seismic Safety, which was a really comprehensive effort that had a lot of community engagement. And it came up with a 30-year work plan for reducing seismic risk in San Francisco. So you can see in this slide the different types of programs and what years they're supposed to occur in. So there's it's actually a 50 task work plan. This is just kind of a high level overview of some of the key programs. And I'll talk a little bit more about the soft story retrofit program, which you probably noticed around the neighborhood and around the city, and upcoming concrete building safety program as well. So the mandatory soft story retrofit program is wrapping up. We just had the last deadline for the final tier in September. It originally passed in 2013. And as I said, it's just wrapping up now. And it's for wood frame residential buildings, 3+ stories, 5 or more units that are built before 1978. And it requires retrofit of those ground floors that are vulnerable to collapse, as you see in this photo. It includes some incentives for housing preservation and expansion with additional ADUs. And overall, this has affected 48,000 units, and about 11,000 residents are now living in safer buildings as a result of this program. And we're about 84% compliance and slowly getting that rate up higher through enforcement. So now that we've wrapping up that program, the next type of building that we're looking at are concrete buildings. These are vulnerable to collapse that we've seen in Northridge and Mexico City and in New Zealand. So we know that not all, but some concrete buildings can have pretty catastrophic failures in an earthquake, and it pose a real big risk to life safety. So the ESIP, the Earthquake Safety Implementation Program, is calling for us to identify, evaluate, and retrofit the most vulnerable buildings. So we want to protect life safety, make sure that we're preserving housing. Some of these concrete buildings are providing critical affordable housing in the city. We don't want to lose these buildings after an earthquake when we're going to need affordable housing more than ever. And we want to make sure that the city can recover from an earthquake quickly. So we're just starting out with this program. We've just started to identify where these buildings are located throughout the city. You can see in the map, it's a lot in the downtown area. You can see a lot of the purple is industrial or PDR, production, distribution, repair in Soma and the southeastern part of the city. So we're going to start looking into this more and doing more evaluation to try to identify, what is a subset of most vulnerable buildings and how can we develop a program to get building owners to retrofit them while also, considering equity and not wanting to have cause displacement through this program. Okay, so just cover earthquakes. On to the next big hazard that we're facing, or not just hazard, but also big change that we really have to make as a city overall, and that's climate change. So our office just partnered with several other agencies to launch Climate SF, and it's really a brand new program to coordinate what we need to do around climate adaptation. So adjusting to the impacts that we know we're going to face, like flooding and heat and wildfire smoke, and mitigation, what we need to do to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions. So this program is really focused on good governance, making sure that these two sides of the climate equation are working in tandem, and that we're doing it with racial and social justice equity at the core, and thinking about health, just transition, nature, and innovation. So this program is starting out by coordinating some big projects around the city that I'll talk about next, including Ocean Beach adaptation strategy, the port's waterfront work, and heat and air quality resilience. So I thought I'd start with the Ocean Beach climate adaptation project, since it's a little bit closer to home for you all. So this project developed concepts for adapting to sea level rise out at Ocean Beach. It includes managed retreat, protection of critical wastewater infrastructure, access and recreation improvements, and beach nourishment. And we're really trying to increase coastal resilience, reduce risk to the infrastructure out there, and restore natural habitat and recreational access. Another big piece of this work that this program is helping to coordinate is the Port's Waterfront Resilience Program. This slide provides kind of an overview of all the different things the Port is working on and kind of different stretches of the Port's jurisdiction. So you can see in the Embarcadero area, they're working on the Embarcadero Seawall Program. You all probably heard, and we know they have the city passed a bond measure a couple years ago to address the seismic and flood vulnerabilities out there with the Embarcadero Seawall. And at the southern waterfront in Mission Creek and Islayas Creek, they're studying the seismic vulnerabilities down there more closely. And also there's a Islayas Creek adaptation strategy that dives into that area that's particularly vulnerable to sea level rise and flooding, and has some important port and industrial and community assets. So just wanted to provide kind of a little bit more on the Islayas Creek adaptation strategy. It's looking at district level and site-specific adaptation scenarios all the way through 2080. And it's aiming to build a resilient, safe, and multimodal transportation system. Muni has a lot of assets in that area, including a transportation yard, and the T3 line runs through that area. We want to protect the jobs that are in that area as well. A lot of industrial jobs that provide living wages to folks who may not have high education levels. And then finally, the Heat and Air Quality Resilience Project. We're working to increase the resilience of San Francisco's frontline communities to extreme heat and wildfire smoke. We're really trying to implement medium and long-term resilience strategies. So things like the Hazards and Climate Resilience Plan came up with, maybe 12 to 15 different strategies related to heat. And this project is really trying to make sure that those are moving forward and getting implemented. We want to make sure they're benefiting communities with the greatest health burden, and we're getting funding for these activities. We're supporting research and evaluation to do this work, smartly, and increasing community involvement. So this project is structured with these 4 teams working on weatherizing existing buildings, increasing community readiness, developing emergency response plans, and planning for more green infrastructure in the city. So that was a lot to cover on our resilience side of the house. In our office, we also do the 10-year capital plan. I'm going to focus a little bit on how the capital plan relates to the resilience plans and programs I was talking about before. So the 10-year capital plan, it guides our infrastructure investments for the next 10 years. And we update it every other year. So the last plan that we did was FY 22 to 31, and it recommended $38 billion in investment. The investment recommendations are really driven by the needs that we hear from the departments. And the service areas are listed here just to give you a sense of kind of like, what are the different chapters in this plan? What are we funding? It includes affordable housing, public safety, health and human services, infrastructure and streets, recreation, neighborhood development, transportation, and general government. So it's really very, very all-encompassing. So this slide kind of hones in on resilience in the capital plan, and above you see some of the kind of resilience challenges that I talked about early on, and highlights some of the specific projects in the capital plan that we're taking on to help address these challenges. Just some examples for racial and social equity. We fund community health centers, better digital connectivity, permanent supportive housing. Towards affordability, the capital plan funds affordable housing. This last year, we had a whole new chapter devoted to affordable housing. So we had the 2019 affordable housing bond. And we have another planned affordable housing bond in 2024. And on climate resilience, we have guidance for all city projects that they follow to plan ahead for sea level rise. So it's like a checklist that they follow to make sure they're considering future, water levels in their planning. Ocean beach adaptation that I talked about, and public respite for extreme weather events. For earthquake safety, the capital plan addresses unsafe buildings that the city owns, investing in retrofits for them. And we also have the Earthquake Safety and Emergency Response bond program that also funds emergency response facilities. And then for infrastructure, just a couple examples, it funds the Embarcadero seawall And we have an upcoming transportation bond as well next year. So in the capital plan, where is this $38 billion coming from? These are the major sources. The first is GO bonds, or general obligation bonds. So these are ones that you'll see at the ballot. They require 2/3 voter approval. They're used primarily for enhancement projects. So things that are new or significantly significant improvements. We also have general fund debt that we use. This goes to the board, so it's approved by them. And it's used for enhancements for public administration type of buildings and asset management, things that are a little less sexy to go out to the voters, I would say, but still really important to the city's functioning and resilience. And then lastly, the pay-as-you-go, or the general fund. We use that primarily for the kind of asset preservation, state of good repair type of things. And it funds both the streets and sidewalks and facilities. So I'm not going to go into detail into all of those sources, but I thought one that might be of interest to this group is the GO bond schedule that the plan includes. So it includes, the next 10 years of general obligation bonds that the city is planning to send forward to the voters. This could change in the next plan that we publish, but right now this is our plan for transportation coming up next year, followed by public health, then affordable housing and waterfront safety. So you'll see we have 1.2 billion in bonds planned in the next 10 years. And we get that number by, there's actually a policy that we have to follow, which there's a capacity limit to our bond program. We can't assess more than 0.12% of assessed value of property taxes. So that's that red line there. You see, we always have to keep our bond program under that red line. And as older bonds get retired, we're able to schedule new ones under that capacity limit. So that is my presentation for this evening, covering a whole gamut of items from climate change and sea level rise and heat to earthquakes to how we're funding our city's buildings and infrastructure. So I just want to thank you for listening and turn it back over to you all for any questions or feedback or thoughts. Happy to take it in whatever direction you all are most interested in.
First off, thank you so much, Melissa, for the presentation and overview. I see a question in chat, and then I see Tomasita's hand. So let's go to the question in chat first. Maria, did you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. I was just wondering if the plan for Ocean Beach, is this the plan that the PUC is starting, or is there going to be more development of Ocean Beach further north of Sloat? Is that in the works in any way?
This is the plan that's led by the PUC. It includes Rec Park and MTA as well. And yeah, the first phase is south of Sloat. That's where they're focused on now. I do believe the strategy includes not necessarily development, but I think it does include in strategies for the full stretch of Ocean Beach to adapt it over time. I think they're focused now on the most vulnerable section, which is the southern section closest to the wastewater treatment facility.
Right. Is there a timeline when planning for north of Sloat is going to be talked about or thought about?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head what that timeline is, but I could try to look that up and get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Maria. Tomasita?
Hello, thank you, Melissa. Melissa, there's a great number of retired fire captains and chiefs, et cetera, who have just signed an open letter because the plans that the city has for the unprotected western half of the city, which has no protection for a fire if it spreads to the western part of the city. And so I guess the city is planning to use the drinking water from our reservoirs to fight if there's a conflagration, if the whole city goes up in flames. And the fire, all these retired fire chiefs and captains, et cetera, are saying that instead that there should be pumps. There should be a pump at the northern end of Ocean Beach. It should be like bringing in seawater, which would be an unlimited resource, instead of using the scarce drinking water that the city might need for our residents in case after an earthquake, everything, the pipes from Hetch Hetchy get destroyed and damaged. And but the city so far is going along with this plan to use our drinking water instead of the plan that the fire professionals are saying is urgent, which would be this high pressure, these pumps, and then a new system of pipes that would come in from the ocean and go to hydrants throughout the Sunset and the Richmond district to distribute water that can be used to put out fires. And I received a notice of a meeting that's this Wednesday. And so I could go off this call and go to my email and then come back and bring that information to everybody here. But what is this? How, how does this tie in? It just seems like the city is not listening to the retired professionals who are very, very concerned, enough to the point of 56 of them signing this open letter. And so how can we get the city to listen and not just, as they so often do, push a plan that somebody, a bureaucrat, came up with when there's something that when it doesn't solve the problem and puts us in worse danger if you're going to take away our urgent drinking water and then use it to put out fires, and it's a finite source, whereas the ocean would be, with these high-powered suction and pressure in these new hydrants and this grid of the Richmond and the Sunset, that really would protect the Richmond and the Sunset from a widespread fire.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I'll just have to preface that I am not an expert in, fire suppression, following earthquake. I have followed this, debate a bit, and it is one of the strategies in the Hazards and Climate Resilience Plan to study and to figure out how to best expand the emergency firefighting water system to the west side of San Francisco. I think you bring up some, good points about the constraints on, potable water. I think another, big constraint that the city is considering is the costs. What can we afford? How much does it cost to bring in the seawater, a seawater only system? And yeah, my understanding is that the benefits that the city is seeing in a dual potable plus emergency firefighting water system is that it's something that we can draw upon in normal times and in a time of post-earthquake. But I've heard about all these, concerns and wanting to look at alternatives. I do believe the city is studying the alternatives. And in terms of, participating in these discussions, I think that the PUC and the PUC's commission is probably the best place for citizens to be involved in that decision-making process.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Tomasita, for your question. Don, did you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I just had a question regarding this funding for affordable housing. And I'm trying to understand how that relates to other aspects of seeking affordable funds for different types of affordable housing amelioration and in San Francisco. I mean, we have had Prop I that we passed at the last election. And those funds are sitting basically being prevented from being distributed by the mayor's office, from what I understand. There's some resolution that's being currently considered to try and force the actual appropriation of those funds to affordable housing. I'm just wondering if what is the nature of this this budget plan and this, the affordable housing aspect of this $38 billion. This is the request for funding targeted in any way, and how does it relate to things like Prop I funding, the Small Site Community Opportunity Purchase Act, supportive housing, social housing?
Yeah. So I'll have to preface again to say that I'm not an affordable housing expert. It's one of the hard things about working on resilience and a 10-year capital plan is that it covers so much. It's hard for me to be an expert in any one of these topics. In terms of the 10-year capital plan and on the affordable housing chapter, it really tries to identify all of the different sources that the city can use for affordable housing, from state and local, and what the needs are. The needs from a preservation perspective, how to even just preserve the affordable housing that we have right now to keep those buildings safe and in good state of repair, and maintain their affordability status, and also develop the new affordable housing that we know we need in our city. The amount of needs that the chapter identifies, I can't remember the exact figure, but it is really, really high. And the amount of funds that we're able to identify from across all the sources doesn't come close, unfortunately. So that's just kind of like one of the things that this chapter highlights is we don't have enough funding overall for the needs. And the funding that the city does, or our 10-year capital plan does have control over the bonds. It's a pretty small amount of the overall need. I don't remember exactly what the bonds have been programmed for in the past, but I could certainly, point you to some of the pages in the 10-year capital plan that would kind of highlight. But I'm sure it's subsidies for specific affordable housing projects to make sure they're able to move forward.
Yeah, I guess one thing to dig down a little deeper into it is just that you have these bond measures, but then you have this whole list of items that this funding is intended to address. But is that how the bond is going to be proposed and voted upon, with this big grab bag of things? Because I can see that being completely subject to political manipulation and the money going into the pockets of developers instead of towards actual affordable housing.
We usually, our bond reports try to identify as specifically as possible the projects that the funding will go towards. There's technicalities around CEQA. So if we're far enough along in a CEQA process, we're able to say specifically which are the projects. Sometimes when we're not farther along, then we describe a little bit more programmatically what the bonds are used for. But I do think this, the bond program has pretty good accountability for specifying ahead of time to the voters what the bond is for, and follow through on that. You know, it can't just be used for anything. It really has to be used for what was in the bond report and voted on by the voters. So yeah, I hear your concerns and about, you know, potential political manipulation. But I think there's pretty good accountability measures in place for our bond spending.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Don. Kathy, you have your hand up.
You cover so much, I can't expect you to know about everything.
Thank you.
I anything that goes into the, and I'm glad it's not going into the general fund, that it's a bond that has to be set for everything. What's happening in the area of mitigation around climate change? Like down carbon emissions, getting public unions to divest from fossil fuels, or what's the other one I was thinking of? Oh, PG&E. Does this group have any influence on, over, or under PG&E? And how can capital be turned and twisted to like be evaluated by how well the biosphere is doing, rather than who's going to make money on it? How? You know, which kind of ties into PG&E and all.
Yeah. So on the mitigation side, the city is about to publish very soon, I believe in about later this month, and I will put the link to it in the chat as soon as I have a chance. I was just looking it up. The city's climate action plan. So the Department of Environment led this effort. There were a lot of public meetings going into and workshops to develop this plan. I hope if you are interested, you had a chance to participate. But the climate action plan is the city's strategy for eliminating fossil fuel use and eliminating greenhouse gas emissions. And it's very comprehensive, from buildings, transportation, healthy ecosystems. So it's really our roadmap for getting to climate neutrality in the city. So I definitely encourage you to check that out. And there's going to be a lot more outreach on it in the coming months, and a lot more work to be done to actually implement all of those strategies. Your next question about PG&E. Is there like anything, is there a specific question about PG&E, or just?
No, they just seem to be kind of a bad actor when it comes to climate and most everything, and how long it took to shut down that plant out in the south, you know, down in D10. And
yeah,
I don't know, they just seem to be our energy supplier. And how do we convince them that, how do we get PG&E into the Green New Deal? I'm sorry, my question isn't very well formulated.
That's okay.
It's
yeah, no, I know it's frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
It has been frustrating, and I know that the city is trying to figure out how to buy PG&E's assets so we can control our own grid and our own energy future.
Yeah, I'll drink.
Yeah, the PUC has been trying to figure out how to get that done, and it'll probably be a while. Until then, they're regulated by the California Public Utilities Commission. They're, you know, that's where like a lot of the rule makings happen. It's at the state level. I'm sure there's, you know, public campaigns that could help as well. But yeah, I think as a city, we recognize that working with them has been very challenging, and we haven't been able to achieve our goals with them owning the grid so far. So it seems like our best option is to try to take local ownership. So
do you have off the top of your head some of the like community groups or environmental groups that are trying to back the city up in getting to do that?
You know, I don't know. I haven't been super involved in that. I don't know if it's really been like a large scale community effort or more negotiations. I'm not really sure. But I can try to find out for you if there's folks involved in.
I should just Google it, but you're here. So
okay, yeah, sorry. I know. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you, Kathy. I guess the maybe one final question, and maybe I'll ask this question if I can use the moderator privilege, if you will. And that's like you know, given that we live, I mean, we definitely, you know, we live on the west side of the city, but also there's, you know, folks in our network that are all across the city. In your professional capacity, Melissa, as you interact with folks that live in San Francisco, what's like one or two things that you either, if you could wave a wand, that you wish like people who lived here either knew or could be, you know, more active in as it comes to, you know, resilience and climate? Like what's that?
I didn't really get into my presentation, but I feel like knowing your neighbors and knowing what your neighbors' needs might be in an emergency. I feel like if I could wave a wand and everyone knew the folks in their building or on their block, and they knew, you know, where emergency supplies were on their block. I feel like that would be huge, and it would help not just in an emergency, but, you know, just day-to-day living, feeling more connected and in a kind of crazy changing city and crazy times.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's one. I don't know if I could think of
That's
a second. I mean, I guess I'm looking forward to being able to engage face to face again. I can't wave a wand and change COVID, but yeah, I feel like being able to have folks in our, you know, public meetings and be able to do engagement on some of these important plans that we're doing, like, you know, all the climate action plan engagement was done virtual. If I could wave a magic wand, we would do some more in-person engagement and planning together. I guess, yeah, those are my two thoughts about resilience. It does take us kind of knowing each other and working together. And so, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like the foundational piece is relationships, right? And relationships and community building. And so, Melissa, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And if it's okay to share your email with everyone, if there's any follow-ups, we really appreciate your time and your evening. I know you have a little one at home.
Yeah, time for bedtime already.
Yeah, so you know, a virtual applause to you, Melissa, on the work that you're doing. Thank you for giving us this overview and spending your time with us.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate the conversation. It was fun.
Yeah.
Thank you. And for we'll see you soon. Thank you. And then we'll continue on with the rest of this meeting and let Dawn maybe stop recording at this point.
Where's that record button? Okay, here we go.